Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Registered Nursing Board meeting. It is June 23rd, 2022, and we will take roll call to establish a quorum. My name is Dolores Trujillo. I am the President of the Board of Nursing, and I've been appointed by the Governor in the Direct Care Provider role. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Good morning. My name is Mary Fagan. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the Nursing Services Administration role.
Thank you, Mary. Jovita Dominguez.
Good morning. My name is Jovita Dominguez. Good morning. My name is Jovita Dominguez, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the Education Licensing role. Thank you.
One of our newest members, David Lawler.
Good morning. My name is David Lawler. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the public member role.
Elizabeth Woods.
Good morning. Elizabeth Woods, and I was appointed by Governor Brown, so I've been here a while. And I chair the Advanced Practice Committee.
Thank you, Betty. Patricia Nguyen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Tricia Nguyen. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the public member role. Thank you.
Thank you. And the BRN Executive Officer, Loretta Melby.
Thank you. My name is Loretta Melby, or Lori, and I am the board's executive officer appointed by the board.
Thank you, Lori. And our board counsel, Reza Pujehesh.
Good morning. This is Reza Pejuhesh with the DCA Legal Affairs Division. I am the BRN's legal counsel.
Thank you, Reza. Moving on to item 2.0. This is general instructions for the format of a teleconference call. Mark?
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then move on to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. When asking a question, please make sure the question is directed at the host me in the dropdown. If you are in attendance, we will also give you the opportunity to speak as well. And then we will also go to the remote locations. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or senior staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.0. This is public comment for items not on the agenda and items for future agendas. BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
There are no requests for comment here at H2.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
No, there's not.
Thank you. Board EO Melby, are there any public requests for comments in your location?
There is no request for public comments in my location. And then just for an FYI to you, board moderator, this is not a publicly noticed location where I am at, as I am not a board member and that's not legally required. So
Okay.
You will not have to check in with me.
Perfect. Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to item 4.0, discussion and possible action regarding appointment by board president of committee members and or chairs and approval by the board. At this time, I would like to appoint David Lawler. David Lawler? Lawler. Oh, thank you. David Lawler to the Committee for Enforcement and Intervention, and also the Legislative Committee. These two positions were vacated by one of our board members who recently termed out. Do we vote on them individually or all together? Okay. We can vote on this individually. Public? Okay, so I would like to make a motion to accept this nomination for David on these two committees. I vote yes. Elizabeth Woods?
Sorry, real quick.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Second it. Yeah.
I assume David accepts the nomination to those committees? Okay.
I accept.
Thank you. And we have a second by Elizabeth Woods. Can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Jeanette Carbello would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Ms. Carbello. Ms. Carbello, are you there? Is your microphone not working? Board President Trujillo, would you like me to read her comment? She's been unmuted. Oh, she took herself off.
Did she write her comment out?
She did.
Would she like you to read it, or did she withdraw her comment?
Let me see. She said, go ahead and read it. Her question
Yes,
is,
Mark.
do we need to make applications to the committee to sit on the board?
No.
To sit on the board, the board members, if I understood that to be the question.
Is it regarding the committee that he is being asked to sit on, or is it the board in general?
Moderator, can you just read the question again for us in person? We can't see the chat.
It says, do we need to make an application to the committee to sit on the board?
To sit on the board members are appointed by, excuse me, a few different appointing authorities, including the governor and members of the legislature. So I'm not sure the process. I believe they may take applications at those appointing authorities. That would be the process to get.
There is, Reza, this is Lori. And there is an application process on the governor's website that talks about how to participate on a board.
Okay, and she clarified by saying board in general and committees.
Committees are staffed by board members. These are all board committees, and there's people that serve on these committees can only be board members once they are appointed to our board.
Okay, she said thank you.
Okay, because I was also going to say advisory committees are separate and can be licensees and public members.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests there in HQ2?
There appears to be no requests for public comment here.
Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comment in San Diego?
No requests here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have a first and a second on the nomination. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Elizabeth Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Tricia Nguyen, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
It's fine. You can abstain, and it carries regardless.
And David abstains. Thank you. Okay, for the next nomination, I would like to ask Patricia Nguyen if she would serve as chair for the Enforcement and Intervention Committee.
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Patricia. I would like to make a motion to appoint Patricia as chair to the Enforcement and Intervention Committee. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give reminders as time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
There does not appear to be any requests for public comment here.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
No requests here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have a first and a second on the floor. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
And Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.0. Discussion and possible action regarding review and approval of the corrected charters for the Nurse Practice Committee, Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, Nurse Midwifery Advisory Committee, and Aprn Advisory Committee.
President, this is Lori, the board's executive officer, and I just wanted to update that agenda item so that you guys are aware that we will only make a motion to approve the corrected charter for the APRN Advisory Committee. All other committee charters were correct and in alignment. There was just some language on the APRN Advisory Committee that we needed to strike out. That language was specific to alternating terms. And the intention was not to alternate terms. It was to just have varied terms for the initial appointment and then continue with a regular, consistent term, therefore going after to follow that. And that is in alignment with all of the other charters. It was just a miss when we reviewed the charters that was to be stricken or removed from that.
Thank you, Lori. I would like to make a motion to approve the corrected charter for the APRN Advisory Committee. Do I have a second?
Nguyen, second.
Thank you. BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
There does not appear to be any requests for comment.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
No, there's none.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 6.0. Discussion and possible action regarding revisions to previously board-approved proposed regulatory text to amend California Code of Regulations Title 16, Section 1427, Clinical Facilities.
Good morning. My name is Heather Hoganson, and I'm your regulatory counsel. Item 6 is an addition to the Board of Registered Nursing's regulations addressing the reporting requirements for nursing programs when they experience any changes made to their use of clinical facilities within 90 days of the change occurrence and in an annual report. It also clarifies some specific changes that need to be reported to the board. These amendments incorporate the recommendations made by the California State Auditor in their report of 2019. This rulemaking package was noticed on November 12th, 2021, and the public comment period was through December 28th. You may recall that agency had some suggested changes which you had adopted during that time. No public hearing was originally set for this proposal, and none was requested. One comment was received, which the board reviewed at its March meeting, just this last spring. The board adopted the text as noticed, and it was reviewed by DCA and by agency before being submitted to the Office of Administrative Law, OAL. So as part of OAL's review, we have worked with them on clarifying the existing BRN process. No policies or procedures are changing with this textual change, but splitting up one subsection E into two, E and F, helped them, and presumably the public, understand how the BRN was implementing the auditor's recommendation. With your approval of the text, we would post for a 15-day comment period, and if no relevant adverse comments are made, resubmit to OAL for their review and approval. And you have a motion in your materials and on the screen, I believe, or I can read it for you if you'd like.
Thank you, Heather. I would like to make a motion to adopt proposed modified text for 16 CCR 1427 as noticed. Direct staff to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, including filing the final rulemaking package with Office of Administrative Law. Authorize the Executive Office to make any non-substantive changes to the proposed regulations necessary to complete rulemaking process.
Jovita Dominguez, second.
Thank you. BRN moderator, please open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Christina Fortes would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Ms. Fortes, I'm sending you a request to unmute. Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Alice Martinegra would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
And
Go ahead.
this is Alice. Good morning. This is Alice Martinegara calling from the Golden West College. I'm the Associate Dean and Director of Nursing. With this regulatory change language proposal, I just would request for the BRN staff to be considerate in regards to how frequent the reporting comes from the school, because this does create an impact on workflow for our offices with the limited staff that we have within our office to report these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah Lee would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
My name is Hannah Lee, and I just wanted to clarify what I'm understanding about this move, which is to separate the sections into two and to decrease the public comment period from 1 month to 2 weeks. Is that right?
Lori or Heather, can you clarify that?
I can clarify that for you. So normally when a rulemaking is started, there is a 45-day comment period. And any changes subsequent to that are a 15-day comment period. That's the normal process under the Administrative Procedure Act. In this case, we have already done the 45-day comment period, so it would be noticed for a 15-day comment period, as is the regular process under the statutes.
Thank you. I'm going to try Christina Portes again, one more time.
I will defer my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
There does not appear to be any more requests for comment.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
No requests here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll take it to a board vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler, abstain.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7.0. This is discussion and possible action regarding voluntary pause of BSN and FNP programs at Holy Name University. Lori, do you have anything to add to this?
Hi, good morning. This is Mary Ann McCarthy. I am a
Hi,
supervising nursing education consultant and the liaison to the Education Licensing Committee. And these two are school situations that will be coming straight to the board for education and licensing. So agenda item 7.0, the discussion and possible action regarding voluntary pause of the Baccalaureate and Family Nurse Practitioner programs at Holy Names. The information on this program can be found starting on page 18 in your packet. And board moderator, if you would please elevate the presenters on the list for Holy Names, please. Holy Names University was placed on the May 2022 board meeting following ongoing financial and some faculty concerns that could affect future enrollment in the BSN program in the summer of 2022. So at that meeting, Holy Names presented and was to return to the June meeting with a plan of action. And so Holy Names is here today with their plan of action. You'll see there's an AIS by the nursing education consultant, followed by their plan of action in their executive summary in your materials. And they are requesting a voluntary pause in their BSN, and they have added their NP program. Samuel Merritt, which is the next agenda item, they have volunteered to take I think it's 14 or 15 BSN students that we're going to start in the summer at Holy Names, and so they're going to pick them up in the fall. So they'll have they'll have to wait a few months, but they are going to start this year with Samuel Merritt. The Holy Names FNP faculty have committed to continue to teaching out the Holy Names advanced practice students through December of 23. And they have 5 students that were going to come in, expected to start in the fall of 22, and they're working with neighboring universities to help them get placed into another program for the fall of 22. So the NEC is available as well as program representatives if you have any questions.
We have one question. Elizabeth?
Sure.
So my understanding is none of the students that are presently in these courses will be losing any credits, and they can be moved on as quickly as possible to another program. Is that correct?
Correct, because the students who were those 14 or 15 students that we're talking about in the Holy Names BSN program, they were scheduled to start, but they never actually started any coursework. So just instead of starting this summer, they're going to start in August in the fall with Samuel Merritt, if everything is approved, of course.
Thank you.
And then for the nurse practitioner group, yes, they're going to teach out everybody that's in the program. And again, it's just new students that were planning to come in, and I believe there were only 5 that were coming in this fall. They're working with other universities to get them placed again, so that they don't back up their timeline. They're going to start this year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments from the board? No. Mary, do you have any questions or comments?
No comments here, or none for me.
All right. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to accept a voluntary pause of the baccalaureate degree nursing program and the family nurse practitioner program at Holy Names University.
Jovita Dominguez, seconds.
Thank you. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments in HQ2?
I actually have one request for myself. I just noticed on the agenda item summary, and maybe Mary Ann, you can clarify this. Additionally, HNU is requesting approval for some changes for the Fnp program at this time. What are those changes? Were those the changes that we just previously spoke of, or are they other changes that we haven't discussed?
Well, let's ask the program director to maybe speak to that. Which would be, hold on one second, the program director is of the NP program is Amy Paulson. Amy, can you speak to that? If there's something more than just the pause.
Good morning. There's a second component to this in the academic plan for some of our students. We admit students in the fall and also in the spring. And we had a minor curriculum revision plan approved last year by Katie Doherty. And we, because of moving some courses more strategically, have a few students that will need to take a class that was offered in the fall, and they came in the spring and we're not able to take that course. So I'm working with Katie to basically just provide the academic plan that allows for those students to take a class that is not traditionally offered at the time. We'll have to finish their curriculum.
Okay, so you're making a change in the way you give your courses in order to help these students continue to progress.
Yes, we're just moving the semester in which they're completing some of their courses.
Yeah, which probably is to their benefit, I'm guessing. You're just letting us know about it. Thank you, Amy.
Yes.
Does that help?
Thanks.
Dolores?
Yes, it does. Yes, thank you.
Sure.
No
And
further questions or comments.
I do think they want to pause because they do admit twice a year, and Amy clarified this for me. You guys do want to pause for 2 enrollments then, because you don't, because you do admit twice a year. Is that what I see? December 22, or I'm sorry, 22 and 23 for the Fnp?
Correct. So we would want to pause admissions that typically would take place this summer at the end of August, and everything beyond that until we reapply and submit some reports to you in November.
Okay. So that's the other thing, Dolores, if you did want them to, if there's any time that you want them to, they'll be working with Katie, of course, their nursing education consultant, but if there's any time you want, you guys want a progress report or some information back or any of that, that could go into this as well.
Thank you. No further questions or comments from the board here.
Thank you. Dr. Mary.
Thanks, Amy.
Are there any other public requests for comments in San Diego?
No requests here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no more public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods?
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez?
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen?
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler?
David Lawler, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 8.0. Discussion and possible action regarding the request from Samuel Merritt University for a one-time enrollment increase. Information regarding this particular agenda item starts on page 32 of your packet. And board moderator, if you could please elevate the presenters on the list from Samuel Merritt. Samuel Merritt University is requesting a one-time temporary enrollment increase to their baccalaureate degree nursing program in the fall of 2022. This request is to assist Holy Names University by taking their next cohort of new students. With this increase in Samuel Merritt, they'll absorb those 14 or 15 students who were unable to begin at Holy Names in this summer. Their curriculum aligns, and they will get approval to use Holy Names clinical sites, as well as hire, orient, and support the Holy Names faculty who are willing to come over to help teach this group. The nursing education consultant and the program representatives for Samuel Merritt are also here should you have any questions.
Are we talking about the nurse practitioner program right now that's included in this?
No, just the baccalaureate program.
Okay, thank you.
Just the baccalaureate program. I'm not saying they won't take, but they haven't really designated specific programs to take the NP students.
I don't have a question then.
Okay, no problem.
No questions or comments here from the board. Mary, are there any questions or comments in San Diego?
No questions here.
Okay. Then I would like to make a motion to accept the request for one-time enrollment increase of 15 students from Holy Names University Baccalaureate Degree Nursing Program in the fall 2022 for Samuel Merritt University Baccalaureate Degree Nursing Program. And this is a one-time increase, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Jovita Dominguez, seconds.
BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Are there any public, I'm sorry, on the WebEx, are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
Yes, we have one.
I'm Dr. Fazia Feroza Lee. I happen to be the president of Chamberlain University, but the reason I'm speaking right now is because I also serve as the chair of our SACANE group here in Sacramento, which is basically the consortium that facilitates organization of clinical opportunities for our students for all the universities with the hospital partners. And I just want to say that this is a symbol of how the programs really work together in making sure that when we have an opportunity to assist, you know, another program with making sure that the students are successful. This is a wonderful symbol, and this is exactly what needs to happen. I just want to commend Samuel Merritt for doing that. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests from comments here from the board?
I appreciate your statement. I agree with you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right. No further questions or comments from the board here.
Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
None here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right. We have a first and a second on the floor. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to item 9.0. This is the legislative update and discussion of bills relevant to the board from the 2021 to 2022 legislative session. And Marissa will be reporting out.
Thank you. This one's on, right? Okay, cool. Good morning, everyone. Marissa Clark. I'm the new Chief of Legislative Affairs here at the Board of Registered Nursing. It's my first time doing a formal presentation, so bear with me. Apologies in advance if I mess anything up. So we have a handful of bills we're going to go over. Some you've already voted on before and have been amended. Some have been gotten amends that haven't been presented. But we wanted to start with our sunset bill because obviously that is of utmost importance. We were hoping to have language in final print, but unfortunately it wasn't ready. However, we have been in contact with committee staff and received an email with kind of some foresight last night on what we may expect. And so I want to turn it over to Lori to kind of go through a little bit of that, if that's okay.
Thank you. So we did receive an email late last night and again this morning with some information that is planning to be included in our sunset bill. And Marissa has graciously been reaching out to them multiple times a week over the last couple of weeks in order to get this information. Monday, our sunset bill will be heard in committee, and I will be there online to be able to make any comments that our board might have. To date, the amendments that are in writing that you can find on Ledge Info are in alignment with what the board has been involved with. And those items allowed the board to take a position of support. These items that were shared with us this morning and late last night, and so I will differentiate that. The first three bullets on the items on the screen is what was given to us late last night. And I say late last night because it was received after 9 p.m. at night. This is the very first time that we have seen it as staff of the board, and this is the very first time that you guys are seeing it as board members. So looking to include is number one, many of the items requested by the BRN. The BRN did take a board position to move forward on the regulatory language to implement the minimum 500 direct patient hour. And that looks like that language will be included in our sunset. And that's a very great thing that allows for a faster implementation where we do not have to go through the regulatory process. B, eliminating the requirement to file a separate application for a furnishing number. That does put us in alignment with many states throughout the nation, where when you do become a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife, you do not need to do a separate application and you do not need a separate license in order to prescribe medications. That could be seen as a huge win for those advanced practice nurses. And then eliminating fee floors to allow for lower fees in the future. Currently in statute, we have a range for our fees and it gives us a minimum and a maximum. The maximum I'm absolutely in support of. The minimum, which is what every single one of our fees are set at, may need to be revised in the future. And so the ask that we gave to the legislative staff was to remove the minimums, to take that floor away, which will allow the board to vote to decrease fees further in the future if we are financially solvent and we come into a budget surplus. And so those are really great things that we can do for our licensees. Number two, it says addressing concerns of the chairs and stakeholders. One is codifying the NUAC committee. We do still have a current NUAC committee. We have made many changes to that, looking at different membership numbers, etc. And the previous language talked about a nursing education advisory committee. This would be a nursing education workforce advisory committee. Again, you can't adequately prepare an RN in student in education without knowing what the workforce need is. And so I think that this is a wonderful thing for the board to consider. Workforce will help education prepare, and education will help prepare for workforce. It's a reciprocal relationship. And so I love that change has gone through or is going through. 2B and 2C is what the rest of this language is. And so we'll kind of go into that. I'll read 2B, 2C, and then cover 3 and then continue on. 2B says reducing duplication of functions between BRN accreditors. And 2C says extending flexibilities related to clinical sites. And then 3 is incorporating many of AB 852 provisions related to nurse practitioners. That was the cleanup bill to AB 890. The bill is now dealing with pharmacy. So they did a gut and amend. It is a pharmacy bill. So those cleanup measures will be added to our sunset bill. Again, everything that is something that our board has supported. We've supported AB 852 and we've supported all of that stuff that has been introduced. The two controversial subjects are 2B and 2C, and I'll walk through those. For context, AB 2637 was a Rubio bill that was proposed earlier on in the legislative season, and our board took a straight position of oppose on that. That language is now being brought over into our sunset bill. We did have an inkling that this was going to occur, and the board president and vice president and I met. We did kind of talk about this, and discussion came out that this may be the first time a board opposes a sunset bill, their own sunset bill. And so just to kind of talk through some of these processes. So just understand that this is conceptual language only, that this language, we should get more of it today. I did receive this conceptual language here this morning. It came to me at 8:56 a.m., 4 minutes before our board meeting, after I contacted staff and said, I need that language. We have to be able to discuss this in our board meeting, knowing that our board has not been included in these conversations to date on this language. So I do want to make sure that you guys are aware that me as the executive officer, Marissa Clark as our chief legislative, and our board has not been part of this conversation on these specific items. And today at 8:56 is the first time receiving this. 2B is reducing duplication of functions related to the type of accreditation between the BRN and accreditors for schools with institutional or programmatic accreditation. It says we still need to work with us to get the language correct and align with what the board is already doing. If approval is on the institutional side, but there is no programmatic accreditation, the school must seek approval for anything related to the nursing program and vice versa. So explanation of this, again, there was some accreditation language in Rubio's bill 2637 that talked about if the program was approved and just some various things. So accept the site inspection reports or performance site inspections jointly. What we currently do now is we do joint visits. Our nursing education consultants do the joint visits. They perform those site visits with the accreditors, with both ASIN, with CCNE, and with NLN as well. So that is a change that our nursing education consultants have done since we received the California State Auditors report on our pre-licensure nursing program. So that is a move, and we did do our very first joint visit in the fall of 2021 and have continued to do that going forward. So that is something that we could align with. The accept the site inspection reports. I have some concerns with that. There have been times that our NECs have gone to sites that have discovered items of public safety that accreditors have not picked up on. And so I would be hesitant to just receive a report from another entity and take that as face value. That is why the joint visits are imperative. Working with the accreditors versus taking the report from the accreditors. Remembering that on the NCSBN website, they talk about the differences between accreditors and board approval, knowing that the board is strictly for protection of the public, and that is not the focus of accreditors. So It is for promotion of that program, promotion of the profession, and really working towards making that program good, which is all wonderful, wonderful things. But the board has the onus of public protection, and it's important to be at the table to ensure that that is done. Accepting continuing approval reports from accreditors. We currently accept the self-study report from the school that is shared with the accreditors. We do not ask them to do a new accreditor, a new report specific to us. Again, that is a change. That is a change since the fall of 2021 when we did our first joint visit. We do accept the self-study report that they turn into the accreditors, and then we only ask for them to do a crosswalk from that report to how it addresses our regulations and statutory requirements. If there are items that are in statute or regulation that are not addressed by that report, we do ask them to include an amendment to do that, knowing that the accreditors are not 100% in alignment with the board rules and regulations. And so that is a catch-all for us. Number 3 says approving ongoing hiring decisions made by the approved program director. That is our faculty approval process. We have a faculty approval process in California, and we have a faculty shortage in California at a crisis level. Accreditors require a master's degree or higher for faculty. The BRN does not. The BRN will allow an associate degree or a diploma grad who has been licensed as an RN and practiced at the bedside for 1 year to come in as a clinical teaching assistant. If you've ever taught a clinical rotation with 10 or more students, or even 6 students, and you're all trying to get your med passes and your treatments done at 9 o'clock, I can tell you how important it is to have a clinical teaching assistant there that can assist you as that clinical instructor to work with your clinical students to get those procedures and tasks completed. And that is a protection to the public to be able to have those clinical teaching assistants, because if they were not available, those students would either not be able to participate in those treatments, or would be doing it with a staff RN that has not been vetted by the academic institution. Additionally, the BRN allows for bachelor's prepared RNs to be a teaching assistant instructor. That assistant instructor can run an entire clinical group by themselves. They can also cover lectures, teach classes, theory classes on site or off site. They just have to report to a lead instructor, and that allows for more people to assist. That is different than accreditors. Again, accreditors require master's or doctorally prepared, and this is something that the BRN has done. I can tell you that I'm currently located in Chicago as we're speaking right now, and I'm at the National Council of State Boards of Nursing executive officer meetings. And I can tell you that legislation has just been passed in Kentucky that allows for bachelor's degree nurses, associate degree nurses to teach, and it is in lieu of accreditation. They allowed for associate degree nurses to teach associate degree programs, bachelor's degree nurses to teach bachelor's degree programs, and master's degree nurses to teach master's degree programs of equal degree. I did share our current faculty approval, and it was received very well. And a lot of the boards of nursing are looking to adopt something similar to what we have, because they felt that that would really aid in the help of the faculty crisis. To have that removed from our board, I believe, goes backwards. So it will not help our faculty crisis in California if this is removed, and only master's degree or higher are allowed to teach in these institutions, academic institutions, and that would further take away the ability for people to get into academia and to help educate our nursing students. We are doing a lot to improve that process. That is a process that has just been updated a couple months ago, I believe actually just last month. And it is a singular approval where we do an approval one time unless there's a leveling change that is need to be done or they add a specialty area to it. And that mirrored the California Teaching Credentialing Board's process where they do a preliminary license and then a full credentialed license. And that's similar to the process. It was, in all honesty, a very cumbersome process prior to this, where you would have one faculty approval, but anytime you wanted to teach in a different school, you would have to reach out to the board and get another approval. That is a process that we are no longer doing as of a month ago, where now we have this attached to their Breeze license. And so they are faculty approval tied to their license versus a faculty approval tied to the academic institution. That's a huge change. And that is something that we're very proud of from our nursing educations and at our board when we voted to accept that as a process change. The other thing that comes with that is accreditors do not require content-based approval. Our board does require content-based approval. Accreditors approve the nurse based on degree and not based on where their expertise is. And it would be very difficult for a nurse that works in psychiatric mental health to be competent to teach students in a labor and delivery, neonatal, pediatric, emergency room setting, medical surgical. Vice versa, it would be very difficult for a labor and delivery nurse, that is the specialty, to be able to teach an advanced med-surg course that had clinical rotations potentially in an ICU. So our Board of Nursing does content-specific approvals. If you have experience where you are equal to the level of the nurse that you are out there in the clinical setting with, you are approved. So if you are med-surg, you are approved to teach med-surg. If you are OB, you're approved to teach OB. If your specialty is pediatrics, you're approved to teach pediatrics, etc. And that has been a public protection that the BRN has offered, because as we know, when you specialize as an RN, you do have some general concepts. They are there, but those specialty, that's where that knowledge comes from. That's where that experience and expertise comes from. And that's what needs to be passed down to these students so they can be safe practitioners when they graduate and ultimately become licensed. And it takes some of the burden off of the hospital systems and the employers when we're looking at competency when they're hired. The next one is to approve substantive change request. If approved by the accreditor, accept enrollment increases. No fees charged for this approval. That is not a terrible thing. I do appreciate that they pulled out the enrollment increases. Those enrollment increases are also, campus, new campus locations, et cetera, because you have to have more students to fill in those new campuses. So that would be an enrollment increase. I know that COADN opposed that section in the Rubio bill. And so I am really glad that they're listening to the stakeholders on that. Other substantive changes that come in front of our board that you guys typically vote on are reviewed by the nursing education consultant and typically brought through as consent agenda items for our board. Those are curriculum based. Those are change of ownership, et cetera. And I could see working with that. And I am happy that they pulled out the enrollment increase. That's really been the work of our board, substantial work of our board recently. One of the concerns that I do have regarding this is the curriculum revision. Right now, we have a process in place for licensing for our California-based programs that do not require our licensing staff to review transcripts. And we just get attestations from our program directors saying that they've completed the program. That is because the NECs, our nursing education consultants, have approved every single curriculum throughout the state of California. And we are 100% sure that the curriculum that those schools are teaching match our regulatory and statutory requirements. This allows for a automated process of all of our applicants that come to us for license by exam from our California programs, because we've already done the review at a previous section. My concern would be taking away that review process, because our NECs would not be doing major curriculum revisions, and that change would be just handed to us from an accreditor, that we would not be able to continue that automated process. And that would go back to having very extended wait times for our licensing to collect transcripts, to review transcripts to make sure that the curriculum that is offered by that school is board approved or is reviewed and meets our statutory, our regulatory requirements as outlined in 16 CCR 1426. So that is concerning, that the curricular revisions, which our NECs do participate in, do make sure that it aligns with our regulatory requirements and does put through the board in a very expedited manner as a consent agenda item. Does not require the school to come and present on it. The NECs do all that work and you guys accept it here. Is not included in that pullout. If they included that in the pullout, I think that's something that our board could get behind, and it would not hinder or disrupt any of the current processes that we have in place now that have been incredible improvements. I could tell you the many emails I've been on that talk about this grad season that's happened in May and June, how quickly it's going, how excited the students are and excited the deans and directors are to be able to utilize our system. I would hate to have to pull that back and reassess that process. The next one says that the enrollment increases, the board may only consider adequacy of resources, including but not limited to faculty, facilities, equipment, and supplies, availability of clinical placements, complaints from students, faculty, and other interested parties, any other factors related to the capacity for adequately training additional students specific to the board and regulations. The board shall not consider nursing workforce issues in approving enrollment increases, including those identified under section 2717. In the highlighted section, that is 2717C, and that is the board shall annually collect, analyze, and report information related to the number of clinical placement slots that are available and the location of those clinical placement slots within the state, including but not limited to information concerning the total number of placement slots a clinical facility can accommodate and how many slots the program that uses the facility will need. The board shall place the annual report on its internet website. It also talks about workforce projections on sections A and B. I did not include that in here, but I do want to speak to that. California State Auditor that came through 2 years ago gave us a report in June of 2020. That report included recommendations to the legislator. One of them was to better inform stakeholders and the governing board's decision-making. The legislator should amend state law to do the following: require BRN to incorporate regional forecast into its biennial analysis of the nursing workforce. The decision-making process that they're talking about is specifically enrollment decisions for new and existing new programs. To remove that as one of the items that the board cannot consider is directly in opposition of the California State Auditor's recommendation number 10. Number 11, recommendation from California State Auditor says to better inform stakeholders and the governing board's decision-making, again, directly related to considering enrollment decisions for new and existing nursing programs, which is what they're now asking to remove, is to the legislator should amend state law to do the following: require BRN to develop a plan to address regional areas of shortage identified by its nursing workforce forecast. The BRN plan should include identifying facilities that may offer clinical placement slots. This specific language saying that they want to remove those two items is absolutely in opposition of what the California State Auditors identified that the board would need to make these enrollment decisions for new and existing programs. And it's shocking to me to see that they want to pull out what the California State Auditors recommended and what we have now as part of BPC 2717 that was passed after Rubio introduced AB 1015 last year. That was supported by our board and went through the legislative session. This is, in fact, removing that from our enrollment decisions when that was the impetus that was there. So that is absolutely concerning to me as well. Then it says in 6, the board may, upon complaint or other evidence that an approved school of nursing does not meet the board standards, withhold the approvals under this section or perform additional site inspections pursuant to section 2788. We do have that ability right now. And then it talks about conceptual language. 2C is the next section. It says make AB 2288 permanent and available anytime clinical sites are no longer available, deleting the time in the state of emergency limitations. 2288 was passed during a legislative session when each one of the members that spoke about it at a committee hearing said we need to do something for the emergency. This was never intended to be we need to do something to change nursing education going forward indefinitely. It was to address the state of emergency. It, in fact, our board took many positions of opposition, worked with legislative staff to change a lot of the barriers that were introduced into that bill that would cause public harm. And the impetus again, and even our board members, vice president, board president, et cetera, during that time, repeatedly said we need to do something for the emergency. That this temporary change is something that we have to do. And that did decrease some of the current standards that we do have in statute and regulation. So what is being asked for right now, this is specifically related to theory and clinical being concurrent. And this is specifically related to decreasing the direct patient care hours that are required for a student to participate in order to gain that hands-on experience that our board has repeatedly stressed in stating that they believe that is the best to prepare our students, and that simulation is used as an adjunct, but not in entirety. They will be looking at that. There's more to come because with the previous language of going to a 500 minimum direct patient care, it did make that our board would be silent on simulation because again, the board's focus has always been on the direct patient care. And the simulation is specifically in alignment with the curriculum that the NEC approves and that clinical hours that would be covered with simulation is alignment with the objectives of the curriculum that is approved. So this essentially disrupts multiple layers on here. And I wanted to make sure that you are absolutely aware of some of those changes. In order for a person to be adequately prepared, and this is all through STEM, this is all through science, is in nursing, when you look at it, it's an Associate of Science in Nursing, a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, a Master's of Science in Nursing. Our nurses are scientists, you know, and so we do go along with that. They actually talk about in nursing education that is in art and a science. It's the caring and the knowledge behind that. And when you look at educating science, they use the STEM, and that system is talking about experiences and exposure and hands-on. And that is something that is imperative to nursing, and that you have to have theory with that hands-on, which is our clinicals, and clinicals with that theory. and it is a symbiotic relationship. To separate those out, to continue that emergency provision, the way that I referenced that in our sunset hearing number 2 last year was those hours are still required, and that requirement of those hours then need to be made up in the following semester. That following semester has clinical hours that are required already. And if it's difficult to complete those clinical hours in that semester, it would be even more difficult to complete those clinical hours in that semester when you add the clinical hours that are not able to be completed in the last semester to that semester. And I identified that as a very bad payday loan, where you take money on your next paycheck in advance, and then that makes your next paycheck short, and you have to then take money again, and the interest continues to build up. That is essentially what happens when you are utilizing AB 2288's provisions on non-concurrent clinical and theory. Then number 2, it says, we'll work with the BRN to discuss out-of-state clinical sites that are close to the border. In our Nursing Practice Act, in the statute, we have a statutory requirement that allows for our students to be able to participate in clinicals. Those students are able to participate in California because our Board of Registered Nursing only has jurisdiction over California and not out-of-state entities. We cannot say that Nevada BRN has to accept our students, and we cannot say that Arizona board needs to accept our students, Oregon board needs to accept our students. We don't have that authority. And the statute that we have is 2729, Business Professions Code. And it says nursing services may be rendered by a student when these services are incidental to the course of study of the following. A student enrolled in a board-approved pre-licensure nursing program or school of nursing. Or B, a nurse licensed in another state or country taking a board-approved continuing educations or post-licensure course. And so that's the statute that allows our students to perform nursing care, nursing services while they attend clinicals in our state. I can tell you again, at this summit that I'm currently attending, today is the last day, they talk about the faculty crisis in their locations, and they talk about clinical impaction in their locations. California is not the only state that is in these, and I think we would not be good partners to our surrounding states to say we just keep increasing our enrollments and we rely on other states to provide the clinical experiences when they too are not doing well with that. And I don't see how with our current statute that that's even a possibility, because each board of nursing has their own ability to approve. So we could not say that these bordering states will take our students. It is up to those individual boards of nursing. Then additional one-offs that will be considered. And it says 1, authorizing, not mandating, the BRN to approve LVN bridge programs with fewer than 2 academic years for licensed LVNs. Currently in our statute, it says that a approved nursing program has to be 2 years in length, and it has to be encompassing of the curriculum requirements that we set forward, which is in CCR 16 CCR 1426. That curriculum includes English, oral, and written. It includes microbiology with lab, anatomy, physiology with lab. It includes sociology and psychology, those related sciences. It includes med-surg, OB, peds, psych, geriatrics. And so currently, if you want a program approved, you have to be able to offer all of those courses. Additionally, there's a statute that addresses military. The statute that addresses military says that those military personnel with other education must be evaluated by nursing program directors for transfer into that program. If they are evaluated and get credit for classes, they don't have to take those classes and they can move forward. into any of the classes that they need assistance in. Additionally, that's a very similar requirement to LVNs. And in our statute, we talk about LVN to RN step-ups. We talk about getting credit for previously received education. And those are all really, really great things because it allows for a nursing student who already has that education to not have to repeat. That also is in alignment with moving our associate degree to our bachelor's degree and not having duplication of credits. And so those are wonderful things. The only issue that I see with this is if an LVN who wants to attend that school, because we're looking at, pipeline of nurses, and we're looking at getting LVNs to become RNs and increasing the RN graduation so that we can address our workforce, is if that LVN who enters the program, if they don't offer OB or PEDS because they think that they're going to get, they're going to be content savvy, where they don't have to take OB and PEDS and they want to enroll in that program and they're not successful, that they're not doing well because they're missing some of those concepts that are covered in OB and PEDS. Where do those students go if they don't have the ability to offer that at those at that academic institution? Right now, if an academic institution has an LVN to RN step up, they're able to retake or take a course that they may not be comfortable in. We're looking at LVNs that graduate as recent as last year to LVNs that have graduated as recent as 20 years ago. It needs to be individualized. When you look at American with Disabilities Act, it's always an individual assessment. It's always where are you at and what do you need, not a one size fits all. And our board, with public protection in mind, has always said, do an assessment, find out where they land, and give them credit, whether it be academic credit, CLEP credit, or experiential credit, for the content that they can prove that they have mastered, and then allow them to enter into your program at any other point within that. If we're approving just an LVN bridge program and we don't have all of the content required for licensure, we have an expectation that this will only serve certain students. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys, that it may not be serviceable for all students. But it, again, not a terrible thing. I do see a benefit to that as well, getting these LVNs in and through in an accelerated process. Number 2, moving the clinical placement language from AB 1015 to the school approval section of the Practice Act. 2717 is that clinical placement stuff. And again, this is straight from the California State Auditor's recommendation on pre-licensures for enrollment. And that is recommendation number 13. That California State Audit recommendation says, to ensure that BRN and stakeholders have an understanding of clinical placement capacity in California, the legislators should amend state law to require BRN to annually collect, analyze, and report information related to the number of clinical placement slots that are available and the location of these clinical placement slots within the state. That has been in process of being implemented by our board since we received the report. We are in the testing phase of that. And having this removed from 2717, but still considered in our pre-licensure is okay. I do have some concerns again, and again, this is me just seeing this language about an hour ago. The concerns that I see with this is it ties back to the clinical approval process, where they're asking for extending flexibilities related to clinical sites, number 2. In a meeting when I said that they wanted to do that when we were opposing the Rubio bill, I mentioned that if the board is not approving those clinical sites, how would we get the data from 2717? Because we need that clinical site information, that we still need to know what clinical sites are being used, how many placements those clinical sites can offer us, and how many of those placements are taken up by current students, essentially a consortium of sorts, so that we can have the data to make these enrollment-based decisions that are talked about in number 5 over there, enrollment increases, and the board could consider the availability of clinical sites. If we don't have this information, how are we to make decisions based on availability of clinical sites? So I understand the concept behind that. If they don't have to answer 2717, they don't need to get the clinical placements. I see why they're looking at that. But truly, we need that data to be able to make enrollment decisions. And again, that's why the California State Auditor recommended this, and that's why that bill passed and the board was in support of that bill, AB 1015 last year. And so there's a lot of things in here that bring up an area of concern for me. Number 3, it says clarifying an entity affiliated with the school is also not allowed to make payments for clinical sites on the school's behalf, and clarifying reasonable administrative fees such as contract fees are allowed. We did talk about this in previous board meetings. I did talk about this to Rubio's staff when we were kind of going for it. And I actually shared a sample contract with legislative staff that's currently working on our sunset bill to share that when the board, so just prefacing, the board supports community sites. Our board has nothing in regulation or statute that says these clinical hours have to be completed in an acute care setting or within a hospital. Our NECs work tirelessly to help nursing schools look for community sites, to encourage them to go to community sites, to give them ideas on different community sites. Those community sites typically have a smaller budget than hospitals do, and they typically are singular or 1 or 2 people that run that site. And when a student group comes through, it does add an increased burden onto those community sites for access into their electronic system, increased printer paper that the students will use to print out items to complete their care plans to turn into the school, and just increased PPE, gloves, hand sanitizer, masks, all that kind of stuff, and that stuff adds up. And so those community sites typically ask in return of taking students that the school pay, $200 per student or $500 per student so they can recoup some of that cost. And my concern is that that's not taken into consideration. It would severely limit the use of the community settings if those individual practitioners separate from larger organizations were not allowed to recoup some of the cost that it would take for their facility to support students. I always am looking at how do we do increased clinical placements, not having a law that could be introduced that would decrease clinical placements. And then it says extending the board. That, of course, is obviously something that we're in support of, whether it be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, or 4 year. I'm okay with any of them. It allows us to continue the work of public protection. It allows our board to continue to make policy decisions that are in alignment with public protection. It allows us to continue the work that we're doing. So I know that that was a lot. I feel like I've talked for about an hour now. But again, this is information that just came to us early this morning, and I needed to get this out to our board that these are what is in discussion, and to also let you know that the board has not, or our board staff, Marissa and I, have not seen this language until this morning. So with that, I open it up to board discussion, board questions. I did speak with legal counsel today, and I did speak with DCA's legislation division over there, and talked about what our board could do. And our board could take a position of opposition. Our board could take a position of support based on the conceptual language that is presented to us today. We could take support with amendments and specify the amendments. We can take oppose unless amended and specify the amendments, or we could take a straight oppose of these conceptual languages, or we can take a support. And so I wanted to make sure that you guys had this language in front of you to be able to have a discussion, to be able to take a position on this conceptual language that will be going forward to the committee on Monday, just a few days from now.
This is Mary. I have a question, Lori. So it's hard for me to understand how we can make any rational sort of opinion about conceptual language. I mean, is it common that we find if something's going to go forward on Monday and all we're hearing the Thursday before is the conceptual language, when does it move from conceptual to actual? Because it seems to me that's the time we'd really want to take a position.
I can speak to what has occurred over the last 2 years as an executive officer. When we went for our very first sunset hearing, which was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Friday, we didn't receive our sunset report until 7 p.m. on the Thursday prior to that. And legal and I, my assistant executive officer, went through that report as quickly as we could to get that back to the legislative staff to be prepared for the next day. That was a very, very quick turnaround time to even get items that were of concern, with, about a 12-hour turnaround from having a hearing for it. That continues to occur, unfortunately. I know that our legislative staff is incredibly busy, just like we all are. And I know that they're continuing to work to do their best job. So are we. We need to have this information to be able to make these decisions. And it's unfortunate that we have not been included in any of this conceptual language to be able to be at the table to have these conversations. When the bill was presented in the last committee and I was brought on the phone to give any technical data, I received an email the night before, or sorry, probably a couple days before. It was a very short period that said, these are the things that we're thinking of. These are only in concept, and I will let you know if this goes forward. I didn't hear anything more about it. And I was on the phone at the hearing. Nothing was on ledge info. Nothing was on capital tracker. There was no language in writing. And the chair read the language that was presented to me a couple days as concept in that committee. And that went forth by the chair reading that language in committee that day without it being published on ledge info or capital tracker, and without it being told to the board that this affects, that language was absolutely going to be included in that sunset bill. We were not made aware. I was made aware that it was actually included when the chair read that language in the committee hearing. And that was shocking to me. Again, this is what's happening. We have my chief of ledge, Marissa, has reached out repeatedly to get any updates, to get any information, to get any of these concepts. And the very first time that we heard anything was 9/17 last night via email. And then when I received that email this morning at 8 a.m., I responded back to the legislative staff and I said, I need to know more about 2B and 2C. The board has been aware of 1A, B, and C, 2A, and 3. But we were not aware of 2B and C. And I said, I need more information on 2B and C. And this was the information that was given to me on 2B and C, as well as the additional one-offs that are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that was given to me this morning at 8:56 a.m. And so that's not how I believe the legislative staff wants to work. That's definitely not how my board wants to work or how I want to work as the executive officer that serves the board. And we do know that repeatedly in these meetings that we've had with legislative staff is that we changed today's committee meeting for ledge to a board meeting so that we could take a vote, because we were really hoping to have some language to actually do an official vote on, knowing that Monday was the last date for this language to get through the committee without having to go back and forth with major changes and major amendments. So it is not, I don't think it is normal for this to occur. But our board is faced with this information right now that it has to consider, because as it was shown in last committee, this language was given to us in the same timeline, and it was read on the floor of that committee hearing by the chair that day.
Tricia would like to ask a question or make a comment.
I think maybe both, make a comment and ask a question. So thank you very much, Lori. And yeah, you're right. You talked for a long time, and I'm glad you did, because it gave us both context and, you know, some of the substance. So I appreciate that very much. You know, I've only been on this board a short while, but I've been so impressed with how we react to, you know, the Sunset Review hearing, the state auditor's report. You know, we have made changes which improve not only the experience of the board, but, you know, the people that we work with. And I'm really disappointed that we're not being included at the table. And I'm just wondering, and this might be more to you, Marissa, but who is at the table? I mean, where are some of these things coming from? Because, like, why would they put in this faculty accreditation issue without consulting with the Board of Registered Nursing?
So I can give you some background on that, Tricia. There was a bill that was introduced by Blanca Rubio in 2019. She was not the author. The author was private education. And that bill was AB 2637. And that was opposed in 2019, and the bill died. That exact bill was reintroduced this legislative session as AB 2637 because the author received some pushback that it was private post-secondary education. That was the sponsors. The author changed it to an author-sponsored bill. Some additional context is Blanca Rubio was the person that also passed AB 1015. That was her bill. That these are the ones that are asking to be removed, certain sections out of it, as well as she was the one that requested the California State Audit to come in for pre-licensure nursing programs. She is dedicated to improving nursing education, and I am right there with her. I am absolutely dedicated to improving nursing education and working to make strides with it. But that bill, again, author introduced this year as AB 2637, did not receive the same opposition as it had previously. There are so one of the other concepts that I want to really kind of put out there for boards to think about. Last year, the board approved 1,457 new student enrollments. Those were enrollment increases, new campuses, new programs last year. 1,401 of those enrollments went to private colleges and universities, and only 56 of those went to community colleges. That is the key into understanding why these things are going through. What is the onus of this? What needs to happen, and I was talking to the Washington State EO, and they did this just last year. They got legislation to support this. They introduced legislation that brought the faculty wages in community colleges up to equal to the nurses that are working at the bedside. They also focused on the community colleges to increase enrollments at the community colleges so the community colleges can offer discounted tuition. And as we know, community colleges right now, the first 2 years are free. There is no tuition assigned to the first 2 years. You can do an associate degree nursing program per our statutes in 2 years with no tuition, no debt, and that would absolutely change the economic system of California. Nursing is the second largest profession in the nation. Our community colleges serve the communities. Our community colleges right now have the lowest enrollments throughout the state. Some community colleges having 30 enrollments a year. We have private institutions that enroll greater than 2,000 nursing students per year and charge tuition greater than $150,000 per degree. The students are going to those schools because we do not have placements at the community colleges, and at the community colleges, they are put on waiting lists. Those school students want to go to nursing school, and therefore, when you look at supply versus demand, the demand is great, and the supply is at the private institutions with large tuition attached to it. Those private institutions can also pay a higher faculty wage. Our community colleges cannot. And so that's where this comes from, is we are looking at changing nursing education. But what will happen with some of these provisions that go through, and what has already occurred last year without these provisions, is 1,401 new student slots were given to private universities and colleges, and only 56 slots were given to community colleges. Our community colleges will be pushed out. Our community colleges will close. We are already seeing that community colleges are taking voluntary pauses in enrollment because they're not able to get faculty. We go to accreditation. Those faculty must be master's or higher prepared. I can tell you from a personal experience, I started teaching with my associate degree. I was a clinical teaching assistant. I moved into an assistant instructor with my bachelor's degree. I then went into an instructor level with my master's degree. That was my entry into nursing academia. And I know it works. I also know that the Institution of Medicines has talked about having bachelor's degrees as an entry only. I can tell you I was a teen parent at the age of 16. My family had never gone to college. I was the first person to go to college. I came in with an associate degree in nursing. I now have 1 year of a PhD. I'm not completed, but I do have my bachelor's and my master's. We have to, when we're looking at workforce, we have to look at inclusivity. We have to look at community needs, and we have to look at the people that we serve, and we need to have several entryways into practice, and we need to have those entryways into practice to be affordable and not carry huge student loan debts. And if we continue to approve schools the way that we do right now, where it is based on faculty availability in clinical slots, and that faculty and those clinicals are going to the accreditation schools. Most of our ADN programs are not accredited. That's another thing to really take into consideration here. Our ADN community colleges do not have the accreditation. It's our private colleges and universities, it's our bachelor's degree universities that do have the accreditation that they're talking about here. It is not a fair playing field when this stuff is kind of brought forward. So hopefully I was able to answer your question on where this is coming from so that you guys can discuss further.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And I would just wrap by saying, I think we should prioritize, 2 or 3 things that we kind of throw ourselves in front of the train and, support this bill at some point. And, emotion will come after there's been a little bit more conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to take a moment. I was reached out by legislative staff with some clarification as this was going through, and I want to make sure that their voice is heard. I was informed that the language was published in the committee analysis well before the hearing date. I was also informed to clarify the comment about the April hearing date, and that the chair reading the analysis as a policy, our committee does not typically vote on conceptual language, and that was not the case at that time. And so hopefully that did help to clarify that conversation that we were having, what occurred by the chair in committee, where that language was put forward, that they were reading it in analysis and was not part of the actual language.
Lori, I do have a couple of questions, and thank you for your presentation, even though it's quite discouraging. But earlier in your presentation, you talked about nursing education as far as AA degrees are concerned, and nurses who are allowed to they don't have a master's degree or they don't have a baccalaureate degree, but yet they can work at various schools and become instructors to the various nursing students, I was unclear whether this is just for the clinical rotation or is this for any type of programs. And if that is the case, do they have to be going on to further their education in the meantime? And if so, do they get some credit for being these clinical instructors at the college? It's a long question.
Thank you. I'll try to answer all of that for you, Betty. There is no requirement that they go on for a bachelor's degree. They can teach as a clinical teaching assistant with an associate degree or even a diploma. They just have to meet licensing requirements, be licensed as an RN. There's no degree requirement for that. And they have to be current. And so that's where that competency comes from. That competency comes from them being current in practice in their specialty area that they're approved to teach in. And so they are allowed to do the clinical laboratory components as a helper, not as someone that can run the entire clinical rotation by themselves. So what they can do is with a clinical instructor at the facility, they can be a second helper hand with them. And they can do med passes, they can do wound changes, wound assessments, they can accompany the student into any type of procedure that student will need to get checked off on or overseen as they do that. They can also do that as part of the laboratory setting, and so they can help out with simulation, they can help off with skills check-offs, etc. They cannot own a clinical group on their own, and they cannot teach a theory component on their own.
So they, will they get any credit for any of these jobs that they're doing if they're going on for a baccalaureate or a master's degree?
That would be up to the individual academic institution. Our board does not get involved in any course transfer evaluations. What we do have required in our regulatory language is that the school, as part of their admission policy, has a process for giving credit for experience. And whether that be academic experience, experiential, work-related experience, or like a CLEP test, that is up to the institution, and we support their policy with that. As a caveat, though, just so you understand completely, Betty, I want to be very clear, is the board does not have any jurisdiction over post-licensure education. So we only have jurisdiction over pre-licensure education. And since these faculty that are clinical teaching assistants with an associate degree or a diploma or a certification are already RNs, any school that they would go to would be post-licensure and therefore not under our jurisdiction. So we do not have any authority to be able to dictate to an RN to BSN program or an RN to MSN program what they may or may not do, because that is beyond what our jurisdiction is.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
This is Jovita. I'm overwhelmed, and I know I did hear some of the sunset hearings when I first got appointed, but I so appreciate your deliberation, if I may call it that. But I definitely would need help in understanding, maybe rereading it on my own and then asking you questions later. But I don't know what we as a board want to do with this, but I guess we will talk about it.
I didn't hear the watch position as an option in what it is we're doing with this. Are you saying we need to support or oppose today because their committee meeting is Monday? And before you answer that, did you also say that in this language there's material this board has previously opposed?
Yes, we do have an ability to change our position to a watch position. That is absolutely something our board can do. Our current position on this bill is a position of support based on the language that was previously put out to us. We have not changed our position because this information was not part of it. So our current position is a position of support. With this information, yes, our board can take a position of support with amendments, oppose unless amended, or watch. That absolutely can happen. We do not have another board meeting scheduled until August. And so we could call a special board meeting in July. We only need a 10-day notice, and we'll all need you guys to travel again and get this all set up. But we are absolutely able to do that if we want to take a more affirmative position after Monday's committee meeting. I will be talking, I'm sure, on Monday, or have the ability to be there. And if they call on me, I will be able to speak at that meeting. I do know that the legislative staff that is hands-on with this is part of our attendees right now and has been watching us deliberate this language that has been presented us today. And so my role as the executive officer for the Board of Registered Nursing is to bring the position of our board forward. I cannot bring a position of me as the EO believes this, or me as the EO thinks this. I have to be representative of what the board wants me to do. So I do need specific direction from the board today on what they would want me to speak about on Monday. And that typically comes from a position of oppose unless amended, and these are the amendments. That typically comes with a support with amendments, and these are the amendments. So I'm able to have those conversations. Additionally, to address the last part of your question, does this include language that the board has already previously opposed? Yes, that's where this language was from. The bill AB 2637 was a Rubio bill introduced this legislative season, and the board, this language is from that. And the board took a straight position of oppose on that language. I can go through quickly and let you know that just looking, when we're looking at A1, ABC, 2, ABC, and 3, the board has previously been in support of all except for 2, B, and C. And that is why 2, B, and C, the conceptual language, was specifically spelled out here to share that with you. So it would just be the language around 2, B, and C that the board has been in opposition with previously. Then when it goes to the additional one-offs, that is new language, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is new to the board. There has not been a chance to discuss that until today. 2, the board took a position of support for that language last legislative session when AB 1015 was passed. AB 1015 became BPC 2717. And so we have supported the language previously that they are now saying they want to remove. And then 3 is something that the board has sought out to have this addressed many years. And 4, we absolutely want to extend our board. So hopefully that helped to give you a really quick synopsis with a rundown of what the board has previously taken support and opposition of.
Thank you. That was very clear.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
You know, Laura, I have another, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, but the 2A, so we've all been in support of codifying the NEWAC committee. So yes, that's in nursing education, saying we have to have education and workforce together. And it's just surprising to me that we would have the language that the board should not consider nursing workforce issues in improving enrollment increases. And it just seems that those are, opposed to each other. Do you have any insight into why they would support one and not the other?
It's all just kind of theory based for me and hypothetical. I don't understand why they would want one without the other. When AB 1015 passed, I don't believe that the organizations that typically follow those bills were well informed of what that did. It was presented as a California State Auditor recommendation. It was supported by our board. And in discussions when AB 1015 passed, and I had to implement that as part of BPC 2717. And just to be completely transparent, we have not completely implemented that at all. We're still working towards that. That is still the outstanding audit recommendations that we have not been able to complete. And when we complete those, we'll be able to have BPC 2717 fully implemented. When I was talking with various stakeholders about AB 1015 becoming BPC 2717, they were shocked. They weren't aware of what that was. So I think it was a miss. And I think that this is a way to kind of correct some of those misses on whether or not that was identified as having that impact. When we look at some of the regulatory languages that we've put forth in what you guys voted on today, as well as what we've been voting on in the past with 1423 and 1432 and 1427, et cetera. People have gone on record on those hearings to say we don't give that information to the board. And our responses to the regulatory language says, according to BPC 2717 that came after passing AB 1015, you are required to give that information to us. And so by reading the comments, by hearing the comments, I'm able to have a hypothetical reason as to why this stuff is being pulled out. But I cannot speak definitively because, again, I have not been included in these conversations. I have not been brought to the table. I have not seen this language until this morning. We have been kept in the dark around this entire process. I have asked for stakeholder information because I'm always doing stakeholder outreach. I'm attending various meetings and answering questions and really just being as transparent as I absolutely possibly can. And I have not been given that information. I don't know if it's tactical. I don't know if it's and I'm new to this role 2 years, so I don't know if this is something that has been done in the past. I can't speak to that. But I can tell you what I've been able to kind of figure out by just putting pieces together and reading comments on other bills, reading comments on other regulatory processes that address the same language. Because part of the CSA recommendation was for us to update our regulations. And we are updating those regulations. They are moving through. They're going to the Office of Administrative Law. They've come to the board. We've heard public comments on them, and we've had hearings on them. And that information directly supports why some of these decisions in our now conceptual sunset bill is being put forth. So various organizations do stand behind the removing of these because it doesn't necessarily follow along with the path that they're wanting it to go on.
Thank you, Lori. Tricia?
Thanks again, Lori, for your, detailed information. I'm prepared to make a motion, but before I do that, if this bill fails, what happens to the BRN?
The board will sunset.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The BRN itself and the work that the BRN does would potentially fall under DCA, and it would no longer be a semi-autonomous board. We would probably become a bureau. So therefore, we would still be able to license, we would still be able to do enforcement, continuing education. What would sunset would be the 9-member board, you guys, and what would sunset would be my job because I'm only appointed by the 9-member board. And so by opposing this bill, which is an absolute possibility for us to do, oppose unless amended, et cetera, what we're essentially doing is removing the 9 members that sit before me and me from the board. And again, when you're faced with public protection, sometimes really extreme measures must happen. And public protection to me is something that the BRN carries out. And if the BRN did become a bureau, that public protection would still continue. I'm confident with that. I have an amazing team. They could carry on. It would suck for me. And I'm sure that it would not be the greatest thing for our 9-member board. But you guys get a per diem and have other jobs. I don't. This is my job. So if opposing this means I lose my job, if it's for the public protection, I understand that. And I do see this as a huge threat to public protection. We see that when we do our continuing approval visits with nursing education consultants. They're out there on the front line. They're doing this. They find things. They get student complaints. They get clinical requests where they want to do food banks as clinical placements for med-surg hours. And any RN that is on this panel knows that a food bank cannot teach you how to manage a med-surg patient or even go in and answer any of those clinical objectives to successfully prepare them to be a safe practicing RN. And not only do we look at education as protecting our students, because that is the board's impetus, is public protection, and public protection is our students and our public. It's not promotion of the profession. And so we have to look at that. What it also does when they get out of school and they become RNs is you're now protecting the RNs at the bedside, the RNs in the workforce, not just the patients that they serve, because we have a thing called RN delegation, and we have a thing that is nursing teamwork, right? And I need to know the nurse next to me is prepared adequately and has the same skill levels that I possess so that we can go and tackle as a team any kind of emergency that comes up with us. And if I'm not working next to an RN that I'm confident has been prepared educationally wise, then that's a problem. And that threatens me as a nurse that has to work next to them. Am I going to be picking up the extra slack for them? Am I going to be managing more than I can carry because those other nurses that I work with are not adequately prepared in education? That happens, and it happens in real life today, and has happened more since these provisions have been decreased by passing of AB 2288 and our students not going to clinicals as much as they had in the past. Do they still pass their NCLEX? Yes. Do they still meet that bar and get employed? Yes, because there's a huge nursing demand. Does that trickle down effect affect our hospital agencies and affect everybody else? Yes, because they have to have longer new grad programs. They have to invest money into those new grad programs. They have to decrease ratios and loads when you have a person that is supposed to be taking a full patient load at the same time as they're precepting a new student. We can talk about the very, very medialized nurse from Tennessee that had a med error. That nurse from Tennessee that had a med error that was brought up on criminal charges had a student with her. And so we already know that, there is additional burdens placed on our nurses out there when students are not adequately prepared, and when nurses who have graduated, who are working in a hospital that have not been adequately prepared, that there is additional time needed to bring them up to speed. There's ample evidence out there that talks about theory practice gap, and that again is why we need workforce in alignment with education to be able to prepare, because what we prepare for in school does not always equate to preparedness at the workforce.
Thank you, Lori. So what I would like to propose, because this language is still just conceptual, is that we take a position consistent with positions we've taken in the past, which would be to support this bill except for 2B and 2C in the initial conceptual language. And then on the second list, again, that we take a position consistent with positions we've taken in the past, which is, I think, to oppose Section 2.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, so that's my motion.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, Trish, that would be support if amended? Okay.
This is Mary. I'll second that motion.
Do we have to clarify what the amendment would be?
The amendment would be to remove the language of duplication between the BRN and a...
It would be to remove the language that Tricia
Okay.
pulled out, which was 2B and 2C. And if you can go back, board moderator, on your screen, it was 2B, 2C, and then the additional one-offs 2. And so it'd be to remove the conceptual language under 2B, remove the conceptual language under 2C, and remove 2, which is the additional one-offs that will be considered.
Okay. And we have a second from Mary, correct?
Correct.
Okay. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments at HQ2?
We have one request for comment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Dr. Fazia Ferozali again. I'm good. Okay. Yeah. I just want to say I am so glad you guys are going forward with it, with the amendment, because this board has been phenomenal the past couple of years that I've been really involved. And I just want to give kudos to Lori, because she's been absolutely tremendous in terms of, you know, making sure that the safety of the public is really what is, you know, at the forefront. I want to also say that if the task force does go forth, you know, we all wear various hats, right? The other hat that I wear is I'm on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce for Sacramento, and I would love to sit on that task force to make sure there's an alignment of the education and the clinical experience. And I do want to give you guys some good news, which is that the clinical facilities and the educational programs are working collaboratively together in regards to the faculty shortage that you're seeing. And what Lori was saying in terms of the pay and so forth is absolutely correct. What we're doing with the Sakane group that I chair is we're working with the hospital partners so that we can train their nurses to serve as clinical, you know, instructors. And it's working great because, as you know, many of you know, there's clinical ladders for those nurses. So it works a collaborative, you know, mission and goals. So that's what I wanted to say, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
We have one more comment.
Hi, I'm Dr. Carol Stanford, and I just wanted to say kudos to everything I heard this morning. I am 100% supportive of this board. I have worked for the Board of Registered Nursing previously for like 30 years. I know the work that's done on the inside out, and I do know that without you all and the individual attention that you give to the nursing, to the clinical, to the nursing training, to the education, that we would fall way behind. I think California's #1 in the protection that they do for their, not just for their, for the public, but also for the students. So I just want to say kudos, and I appreciate everything that the executive officer is doing. I believe that she is right on point, and she provides you all with good information. So I just wanted to just say kudos to the board, and we support you all in everything that you do, okay? All right.
Thank you. We don't have any further comments or questions here in Sacramento.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
No more requests here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Okay, the motion carries. I would like to ask that we take a break at this time for 10 minutes. So we will come back at 11:25. Quorum.
No, I think, well, it was just a break. We didn't recess or
Okay.
adjourn.
All right, so we're back from break, and we're picking up where we left off, and that was with Marissa Clark, giving us the legislative update of the bills relevant to the board.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have about 5 bills. I'll try and be quick with them because I know time is going fast. The first one is Assembly Bill 657. This has not been discussed by the board before. It was a gut and amend earlier this month, which means the language was replaced with what it was previously. It's authored by Assemblymember Jim Cooper. It's a pretty straightforward bill. It would require the Board of Registered Nursing, the Medical Board of California, the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, and the Physician Assistant Board to expedite the licensure process of an applicant who can demonstrate that they intend to provide abortion services within their scope of practice. And the board goes on, or the board, excuse me, the bill goes on to specify that the applicant must demonstrate their intent to provide abortion services by providing documentation, which is outlined as a letter from an employer or healthcare entity indicating that the applicant has accepted employment or entered into a contract to provide abortion services, and the applicant's starting date, the location where the applicant will be providing services, and that the applicant will be providing services within the scope of practice of their license. And so that is the first time bringing to you all for discussion. Are there any questions on this one?
I have a question. Do we know what they mean by expedite the licensing process?
I don't believe there's a time frame outlined in the bill. Lori, feel free to correct me. I think we have, expediting licensees is not a new thing. There's certain categories of applicants, such as veterans or spouses, that do get expedited. I don't know if there's a set time frame, though. That isn't outlined in the language currently, though.
That's correct, Marissa. There is no set timeline. Even when we have in our statute, we have that we expedite military spouses, we have that we expedite special visa holders, immigrants, et cetera. And there's not a specific timeline. It just means that they're taking ahead of the regular applicants, and we do that currently. So it would not be a change of process for us and should not have any fiscal impact.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mary, any other questions or comments from San Diego?
No, none here.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to accept the board's position to accept Assembly Bill 657, Healing Arts Expedited Licensure Process, Applicants Providing Abortion Services. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Woods.
Thank you, Betty. BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment."
This is Reza. Real quick while waiting. Just to be clear, was the motion to support the bill?
Yes.
Thanks.
Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments at HQ2?
No, there doesn't appear to be any requests for comment.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
Nope, none here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you, Mark. All right, we have a first and second on the floor. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you. So the next bill has been brought to you before, and that's Senate Bill 1375. Previously, the board voted to take a support position, and then it was amended again actually the day of our last board meeting, as well as yesterday. So I think our board meetings are lucky for this language. So I'll just go over quickly kind of what the bill does and then specify what the amendments were. So the bill would specify the training options for nurse practitioners and certified nurse midwives seeking to perform abortions by aspiration techniques. The bill would clarify that an independent nurse practitioner may perform abortions by aspiration techniques without physician supervision. The bill would delete the existing requirement that the Board of Registered Nursing define the minimum standards for the transition to practice requirement for independent nurse practitioners, and it would authorize a nurse practitioner to use prior practice experience to meet the transition to practice requirement. And so a good chunk of that was in the bill when it was voted on last time. The main thing that the amendments did was they expanded the list of eligible trainings that a nurse practitioner or a certified nurse midwife can take to achieve clinical competency and perform an abortion by aspiration technique without supervision. And it also specifies that the training must include both a clinical and didactic component. So I'll go through really quickly. The trainings are actually listed in the bill for nurse practitioner and certified nurse midwife. So I'll go through those now. For nurse practitioner, the trainings include the following: a board-approved nurse practitioner program or in a course offered by an accredited nurse practitioner program, a course offered by a board-approved continuing education provider that reflects evidence-based curriculum and training guidelines, or a course approved for Category 1 continuing medical education, a course offered by a state or national healthcare professional or accreditation organization, training based on the competency-based training protocols established by the Health Workforce Pilot Project number 171 through Department of Healthcare Access and Information, formerly known as OSHPED, and training and evaluation of clinical competency performed at a clinic or hospital on performing abortion by aspiration techniques that is provided by any of the following who have performed the procedure themselves: a physician and surgeon, a nurse practitioner or a certified nurse midwife authorized to perform abortion by aspiration techniques, or a physician assistant authorized to perform abortion by aspiration techniques. And It also expands the trainings for certified nurse midwives, which are very similar to the language around nurse practitioners, so I'll go through those. A board-approved nurse midwifery program in a course offered by an accredited nurse midwifery program. A course offered by a board-approved continuing education provider that reflects evidence-based curriculum and training guidelines, or a course approved for Category 1 continuing medical education. A course offered by a state or national healthcare professional or accreditation organization. Training based on the competency-based training protocols established by the Health Workforce Pilot Project number 171 through the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. And lastly, training and evaluation of clinical competency performed at a clinic or hospital on performing abortion by aspiration techniques that is provided by any of the following who have performed the procedure themselves: a physician and a surgeon, a nurse practitioner, or a nurse midwife authorized to perform abortion by aspiration techniques, or a physician assistant authorized to perform abortion by aspiration techniques. And lastly, the amended language from yesterday actually also specified that a person authorized to perform abortion by aspiration techniques should not be punished, held liable for damages in a civil action, or denied any right or privilege for any action relating to the evaluation of clinical competency of a nurse practitioner or a certified nurse midwife. I know that was a lot, but that is essentially the main changes that came from the last time that we discussed. Any questions on that language?
I just have one.
Yeah.
The language that states a violation of the above provisions by a nurse practitioner or certified nurse midwife would constitute unprofessional conduct. Was that in the last one we support, or is that part of the new language?
Let me double check. I believe a version of it was, but please do not quote me.
Marissa, can I have you speak closer to the microphone? I'm not able to hear you remotely.
Yes, sorry about that. Apologies. My internet is not the fastest. So that language came in on the May 19th amendments.
Okay.
So those amendments happened the day that the board previously discussed it, so they weren't wrapped into that discussion, so they would be new.
And we previously supported.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Any other questions or comments? Patricia?
Well, I just have a follow-up with your question. Marissa, maybe you could answer this. Is something like that often put in statute, that a violation is deemed unprofessional conduct? I mean, it seems like that's unusual.
You know what, that is a good question. I am not sure in this subject matter if it's common. I have seen languages around clarifying certain liabilities, certain punishments and whatnot in other topic areas. I couldn't speak directly to the nursing one quite yet. I don't know if Lori has some insider context, but I have seen if there's maybe a lack of clarity on what could be the liability, the punishment, the crime, what it not. Sometimes they'll put some language in there specifying just to make it very apparent.
Yeah, so Tricia, I can answer that a little bit. This is very similar language to a bill that we took position on last board meeting. Marissa, do you have that bill number?
I believe, are you AB 2626?
I think that's the one it was, where it said that you couldn't punish them solely for performing the abortion.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct? Yeah. And then lots of statutes will say something like unprofessional, and they do that. And we specifically have it in our disciplinary guidelines that are in regulation, where we define all of that information. So it is fairly common.
Well, I knew that we had it in our regulation. I just was not certain that it was in statute before. I wondered if that was an anomaly. But you're saying no, it's there in certain instances.
In certain instances, not necessarily in our Nurse Practice Act. We have most of our, it's within our disciplinary guidelines and regulation. And then I believe your question last time was asking whether or not this was a problem that we've seen where we penalize or discipline any nurse practitioners or nurse midwives who perform abortions to date. And again, no. I'll just reiterate here that that's not something that we've done or that we do. It is based specifically on unprofessional conduct, whether they're negligent, etc., not because they perform. And so, like we said in the last board meeting as well, was that the thought is that this is kind of a preemptive thing to what's going on federally with the changes to Roe versus Wade and the individual states taking abortive positions versus going to a federal position.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any other questions or comments from our audience? Jovita?
I might have not understood correctly, but going to, is it AB 90 where the new nurse practitioners can independently work without a physician present after so many years? How does this bill fall into that? Or am I not understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so they are, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I can address that, Jovita. So with the passing of AB 890 and the both status of the 103 and the 104 nurses that come out of AB 890, those nurses specifically work without standardized procedures. In our current business and professions code, we have a provision in there that allows for nurse practitioners and nurse midwives to perform abortion, but specifically states that it must be done under standardized procedure. And so this bill addresses that for the 103 and 104 NPs, as well as the nurse midwives who don't or will not operate under standardized procedures, to be able to continue to perform the service that they've performed in the past without having to go backwards and go back underneath standardized procedures to be able to do that. So it is fixing a miss for that particular aspect. When AB 890 was passed, they did not address that specific statute that required those practitioners who are now independent to do it under standardized procedure, because that was the way that was done previously.
Just a further clarification of that, presently, nurse practitioners can function without a physician being present. They do not have to be physically present for a nurse practitioner to function.
At this time?
Yes, that's correct. They do not have to be in any defined location. There's no mile radius. There's nothing for that supervision that they outline within the standardized procedures. They just have to define that supervision in a standardized procedure, and that's done through the physician, through the nurse practitioner, and through the healthcare facility that they are associated with.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any other questions or comments from our audience? All right. Mary Fagan, are there any other questions or comments from San Diego?
None here.
All right, thank you. So I would like to make a motion that the board supports this bill. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Woods.
Thank you. BRN moderator, can you open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I would like to give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there at HQ2?
I do not see any requests for comment here.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
Nope, none here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so hopefully it's loud enough. The next bill is Assembly Bill 1914 by Assemblymember Davies. This was brought to the board before, I believe, at the March board meeting, and it was subsequently amended. The previous position the board took was a support if amended. So I'll go through kind of a summary of the bill right now. It would modify existing CPR and first aid training requirements for resource families who meet other requirements. It would ensure resource families complete CPR training and first aid training or demonstrate equivalent certification no later than 90 days following resource family approval. And it specifies that a resource family parent who has a certificate of completion for basic life support or healthcare professionals or pediatric advances life support or a higher standard of training that certifies CPR and for whom the certification is currently active is exempt from completing the CPR training requirement upon demonstrating proof of certification of completion and until the date the certification expires. It specifies a resource family parent who has an active and unrestricted licensure as a healthcare professional issued by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Emergency Medical Services Authority is exempt from completing the first aid training requirement upon demonstrating proof of active and unrestricted license until the date the licensure expires. And lastly, it ensures resource families prior to expiration of CPR and first aid certificates obtain training to remain certified in CPR and first aid or demonstrate equivalent certification and submit copies of the certificates verifying completion of the training. It exempts resource family parents who are exempted from the first aid training requirement as described in the provisions I just spoke of from that requirement. And so when the board discussed it and took a support if amended position, the proposed amends were that the bill be amended to require the exempted group of healthcare providers with active licensees show proof of current CPR certification, which these most recent round of amends appear to have addressed. So we wanted to bring it back to you all.
So the amended portion would be the third paragraph. The bill would exempt from CPR training requirement.
The amended portion is actually that whole chunk that is included in there comes from the amended language. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
It sounds like we might want to, do we want to change our position then? If the language that we suggested was accepted, right? So we would switch it from support if amended to just support? Is that what we want to do?
Yeah. That's what we're looking at, yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to do that.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there at HQ2?
There are no requests for public comments. No requests for comments here.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
None here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have a first and a second. Let's take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Moving right along. So the next one is Assembly Bill 2790 by Assemblymember Wicks on reporting of crimes and mandated reporters. This bill was discussed at the last meeting and subsequently took some further amends, which is why we're bringing it back. So in summary, the bill would limit a health practitioner's duty to make a report of injuries to law enforcement to instances where the wound or injury is self-inflicted or caused by a firearm. Rather, it require a healthcare practitioner who is in their professional capacity or within the scope of their employment knows or reasonably suspects that their patient is experiencing any form of domestic violence or sexual violence to provide brief counseling and offer a referral and warm handoff to domestic violence or sexual violence advocacy services before the end of treatment to the extent that is medically possible. It would also allow for the reporting of assaultive and abusive conduct when a patient requests it, and it would give health practitioners immunity from criminal or civil liability arising from any required or authorized report. So as I mentioned previously, the board discussed this at the last meeting and took an opposed position. The two main amends that took place after that discussion were the amended language that allows for the reporting of assaultive or abusive conduct if the patient themselves requests it, and the amended language that provides healthcare practitioners with immunity from criminal or civil liability arising from any report that is made in good faith and in compliance with the provisions of the bill. Bring that back to you today.
Any questions or comments from the board? Patricia?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with this bill, as I was last time, and I do see the amendments, and I'm still uncomfortable with it. Where are women's groups? I mean, do you know who is, are women's groups supporting this bill?
I can pull up the list of support and opposition from the most current. It does have a good amount of community-based organizations such as California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, Bay Area Women Against Rape, Family Violence Law Center. There's a list of about 15 to 20, I would say, of community CBOs in support, correct.
Well, yeah. That's significant to me. I hate to roll back something like this, but, you know, the science may have changed or the psychology may have changed, and so I need to be willing to change with it. I just know how hard women's groups fought for these, reporting requirements in the 90s, so that was a long time ago. I'm old.
Tricia, this is Lori, the executive officer as well. There are some large organizations that are in opposition of this as well. One that struck me was the forensic nurses, the ones that do sexual assault nurse examiners. They were in opposition of this, and they deal with that kind of on the front line where they get the victim in, and deal with them as well. And so I did want to bring that up. Additionally, the part of reporting does not address gender. And so I'm not able to see opposition or support from non-binary or male. And we know that commonly in medicine, when we're looking at domestic violence, we're looking at victims of sexual assault, et cetera, that men don't report on themselves at all. And so I wonder if that's something that, Marissa, is there anything in there on who actually support the bill or oppose the bill that are large organization or gender specific or anything? Because I know this was a women's right in the 80s, as you said, Tricia, but I know that there's a huge focus now on getting men who are abused or non-binary who are abused a voice as well. And so again, I would hate to see something go backwards based on when I did have some conversations with some organizations regarding this bill, they said it would be left up to nursing assessment and nursing's decision on whether to report or not. And there may be some more items that need to be flushed out with that. I would hate to miss some key groups that were really working towards change on getting men or non-binary to come forward to get that assistance for abuse right where the women were previously in the 80s.
I still don't see the reason why we want it removed. Perhaps I'm missing something here, but what is the main reason that they want this removed?
Yeah, so I can pull up the analysis.
Yeah, some of the information that I've heard, and again, it's not inclusive, so this will buy Marissa some time to pull up some of the oppose and support positions that are there for us to review on the web, was that victims of the domestic violence of these various assaults are less likely to come forward to seek medical care if they believe that when they're receiving the medical care that the person that caused that action would get into trouble because the person that they're seeking the care from is a mandated reporter. This kind of brought a lot of thoughts to my mind. I worked as a sexual assault nurse examiner. So for full transparency, I did that from 2009 for about 5 years. And when we would get victims of violence that made it to the medical healthcare facilities for treatment, the treatments were severe. I mean, the inflictions were severe, and I understand that varies on place to place where you work at. But the other thing is when you're in some of these relationships where you're a victim of the violence, it's not that they don't want you to seek care, is they don't want anybody to know. It's not that they don't want you to go to medical, they don't want you to step outside the house because then your neighbor will see it and your neighbor will report, or etc. The other thing is teachers are mandated reporters. And so it's interesting to me that there's not a identical law going through that address the other professions that are mandated reporters, that it's strictly only addressing the healthcare nurses that are mandated reporters. So those were some of my questions. I've reached out for some more information. I didn't get a lot other than the nurses wanted that autonomy to make that decision on whether they would report or not versus having it mandated upon them. Again, that's something that our board needs to consider, whether that's protection of the public or promotion of the profession. And so just some key things that I wanted to throw out there for consideration.
I also used to do sexual assault exams, and I can tell you abuse is going to continue until it's somehow stopped. And by not reporting it, I just don't understand why would we want to remove something like this. Because sometimes that's the only way to get these abusive situations taken care of.
I think, Betty, and this is Lori again for the people that are viewing this remote, I think some of the evidence there shows that there are less people to seek medical care because they know they're mandated reporters, and that's the impetus to bring this forward. So I think in concept, this is something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be looked at. My concern is that it's not a complete bill to address that. They have call outs for mandated reporting that will still happen for pediatrics. Mandated reporting will still happen for elderly. Mandated reporting will still happen for vulnerable adults, similar to like your people with disabilities and such. And I understand that. I understand that they're calling those out, but then what defines the adult person that is not disabled in some way, that is not, elderly or pediatric, to be able to do this different than those defined classes that are kept as mandated reporters. And so when I have previously dealt with patients that have been victims of domestic violence or victims of sexual assault caused by their partner, etc., that I don't understand why they wouldn't want the same assistance. And then again, like I said before, how does that address male victims who rarely seek assistance and rarely report?
Yeah, and just everything Lori said, but also just to clarify that there still would be the reporting, but rather than law enforcement, they'd be reporting to a domestic violence or sexual violence advocacy services. So that does include it in the provisions of the bill.
I think we should oppose this bill.
David, did you have a question?
I do. I agree. And my question goes to the intention of the bill. Is the writer trying to protect hospitals from immunity, or are they trying to protect patients from more of a nightmare afterwards? Because as a mandatory reporter, as a teacher, I am immune once I write my report to law enforcement. But it's not a harsh handoff to law enforcement, and there's no, warm handoff or anything. I read this and I say, well, why can't you do both? And who are you trying to protect with this line here about immunity when that's already given? That's a natural. So I guess I don't understand. And as a public member and not a nurse practitioner, I don't know what happens. Mm-hmm. When you hand them off to law enforcement, do you walk away and there's no counseling with domestic violence? Or no. So I would think that I look at this and I think, who are you trying to protect? And I'm not sure it's the victim.
Yeah, I can read some comments in support. I don't believe this indicates.
Marissa, can you come closer to the mic again? We are not able to hear you remotely.
Sorry. Maybe I'll hold it. I think it's the awkward positioning. There we go. So according to the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, there was kind of a long statement, but I'll read a little bit of it. So because domestic and sexual violence often removes one's ability to exercise control over their lives, advocates help survivors achieve safety and healing by supporting their self-determination and empowerment. Not only does medical mandated reporting replicate harmful coercive patterns over survivors' lives, it puts them in greater danger. According to a study of over 2,400 survivors who called the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 51% stated that mandatory reporting made their situation much worse, and another 32 stated that it made things either worse or did not help them at all. It goes on to say survivors in California deserve to be able to access trauma-informed health care separately from criminal legal systems and discuss what is going on with their health provider without fear of unwanted systems involvement. The research is clear about what survivors want from health care providers: self-determination, autonomy, validation and compassion, confidentiality and trust, and informed providers who are able to offer resources and health promotion strategies.
I wouldn't discount that. Obviously, that's their report, but as a mandatory reporter, not doing any inspection like you do as a nurse in a hospital, seeing obvious signs of neglect or abuse, how can you not report on that to law enforcement? I mean, perhaps, yes, you don't want to go home and have the police there going, why is my mother in handcuffs? Oh, because she was hitting you this morning. But
David, I agree with your statement, but I feel that I personally support this. I do not support it. I just want to make it clear that I don't support it because we have something in place, and it took a lot for it to be in place, and we're going to be worse off.
Can I ask a quick question? So we have an opposed position on this bill, so if we just take no action, if there is no motion, our opposition just stands. Is that correct?
I believe so. There were minor amendments, so technically what you voted on last time, there
we would
changes
have
to the language.
We have to make a motion because there were amendments.
I made the first motion.
What's the timing for this bill going through now?
It is currently.
Is it also like Monday is when it's going to go through? If we need to change our position now if we wanted to, or
It isn't being. Yeah, no, it's not being heard on Monday, I don't believe, but I can pull up when it is being heard. It would be going through a separate policy committee. It's going through Senate Public Safety on Tuesday, actually, so not too far off.
And I just feel like my gut wants to oppose it, but hearing what all these, professionals and people who study this are saying makes me think maybe I should reconsider my position. I'm really torn on this one.
I certainly can't speak for every emergency room in California, but I know if somebody comes into the emergency room and they have been abused physically or sexually, there are all kinds of resources available to them besides reporting it to the police. That's one part of it, but there are also many, many services that are available to the patient that comes in with this situation. So it's not that they come in and it gets reported and that's the end of it.
I just have a question, theoretically. If a patient came in who was abused and this language was in place and there was not the requirement to report to a law official, such as the police, what would be offered that patient if that nurse, let's just say a nurse because majority of us are nurses here, what would be offered to that patient as a nurse? What could I offer that patient if I did not report this, if I did not have to report this?
You would still provide the same medical care, that level of medical care, and they would get their wounds, et cetera, addressed. And then you would set them up with, like a victim's advocate or some sort of follow-up care for therapy, so like a social work consult. So that they would get that, but they get that a lot of times as it is right now. So I know when I was working in an emergency room, et cetera, and I know when I worked as a sexual assault nurse examiner, we did report to the police, but we also did get a victim's advocate. And in the sexual assault cases, that victim advocate sat with them through the exam, through the evidence collection, went home with them, attended the court cases with them, provided counseling afterwards, and so that was there. When a victim is seeking care, they're afraid. They're absolutely afraid. And when a victim is being abused by somebody that they love and trust, that love wants them to not get that person in trouble. There are so many emotions. There's so much fear that cycle around this, and I absolutely understand that. But there's also evidence out there that it takes about 8 times for a victim to leave their abuser. And during that 8 times, the abuse escalates, sometime to the point where we would then, according to this bill, be mandated reporters, because there would be an incident of violence that included a gun where a person tried to take somebody's life. In medicine, we look at prevention. We don't want to get it to the tertiary care. And so I do understand, again, this concept, and I do think that it's a good thing to look at it and have these discussions and look at what we're doing for the future. And I'm always in support of following the evidence. My concern is that this bill isn't well fleshed out yet. And I think that there's more to be known.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? We have a motion. Did we have a second?
Jovita Dominguez seconds.
Okay.
To oppose, correct?
Yes.
All right, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Saskia Kim would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Good afternoon, Saskia Kim with the California Nurses Association. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to express our support for AB 2790, which is intended to modernize California's medical mandatory reporting statute in order to better protect survivors of domestic and sexual violence and ensure their ability to access vital health care services. A copy of our letter has been included in today's supplemental materials, and thank you to board staff for posting that online. Research has shown that mandatory reporting to law enforcement has kept survivors from seeking health care or sharing information with their health care providers. Research has also shown that mandatory reporting without the consent of the survivor often makes the survivor's situation worse. Marissa mentioned the statistics cited by the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, and I would just emphasize that 51% stated that mandatory reporting made their situations much worse. Although the intent of the medical mandatory reporting law was to reduce domestic violence, assaults, and homicides, the last 3 decades since the law was passed have not yielded these results. In fact, survivors of domestic and sexual violence report that mandatory reporting has decreased their safety and self-determination. Fear of involving law enforcement is a main reason survivors decide not to tell their health provider about domestic violence or even seek care in the first place. And there are many reasons why survivors don't want to involve police, such as fear of angering their partner and increasing the severity of violence, or not wanting their partner to be arrested, being arrested themselves for defending themselves, or exposing themselves and their families to involvement with child welfare systems. Mandatory reporting laws also discourage immigrant survivors from seeking health care. If a survivor or their family members lack protected status, mandatory reporting to law enforcement could lead to deportation or detention if ICE is notified. And so for all those reasons, we are supporting this bill, and I appreciate and thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. Are there any public requests for comments there in HQ2?
There are no further requests for comments here.
Thank you. Dr. Mary Fagan, are there any public requests for comments in San Diego?
None here.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. We have a first and a second. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
I'm going to abstain.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Oh, okay, thank you. Elizabeth Woods?
I'm opposing the bill, so yes, one of those things. Yes, I vote.
Jovita Dominguez?
Jovita votes yes.
Patricia Nguyen?
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler?
David Lawler, yes.
Okay, the bill carries.
Okay. Excuse me. So the last and hopefully least painful bill, it is an indirect impact, and it was another gut and amend, so this hasn't been brought to the board before. It's Senate Bill 1134 by Senator Melendez, and it has to do with substance use disorder counselors and allied behavioral health boards. So this bill would create a new allied behavioral health board within the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it would transfer the responsibility to oversee substance use disorder certifying organizations from the Department of Healthcare Services to this new board. It would require the board to establish regulations and standards for the licensure of substance use disorder counselors, and it would require an applicant for a substance use disorder counselor license to have obtained a master's degree in alcohol and drug counseling or a related counseling master's degree and to pass specified examinations.
Any questions or comments from the board?
So, Marissa, are you, if you can help me interpret this, I'm sort of trying to correlate to something similar to nursing. So, are they saying that the counselor that would assist somebody that's trying to, seek counseling, that counselor would have to have a master's degree?
That is what's in the language. It's transferring the kind of oversight and certifying authority from Department of Healthcare Services to the Department of Consumer Affairs and creating a new board similar to how we're a board. And it would be focused on substance abuse disorder counseling, and they would have to have a master's in, let me pull up that language. Correct, obtain a master's degree in alcohol and drug counseling or a related counseling master's degree and to pass specified examinations.
In my mind, I'm speaking for myself, having, siblings with this situation and having to seek counseling. I feel like a counselor should not be mandated to have a master's. I don't know what the board feels, but, I mean, just like in nursing, an ADN nurse is no less than a nurse that has a bachelor's or a master's. If they're taking care of patients at the bedside, I feel that we are equal, and we should not have our degrees weigh heavier. I feel like I don't feel comfortable with that, because that doesn't mean that a master's prepared nurse is better than I and can take care of patients better than I. And I did have an ADN. I did further my degree because I knew that I would still have to work at 60 and I might not be able to do bedside nursing at 60, so I thought ahead. But that does not mean that I'm bachelor's prepared and an ADN nurse that might have even more years than me, that I am better than her. So I don't feel comfortable with this bill.
Patricia?
Thanks, Jovita. That's a helpful perspective. I appreciate that. I just don't see the need for us to take a position on this bill. I probably would support something like this. It's probably a pretty good idea. I just don't know why the Board of Registered Nurses would weigh in.
I agree with you, Tricia. I feel like this is not necessarily in our lane.
What is your perspective, Lori, as a professional?
Yeah, it's a indirect bill. I think it was just information only. I don't believe the board needs to take a position on this.
Okay, information only. Moving on to the next bill.
That's it.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you all.
At this time, we will take our lunch, recess the board, and we will come back. And you want to go into EIC first? Yes. Okay. My apologies. We'll go into EIC at this point, and after EIC, we will recess the board for lunch.
We actually need to recess the board so we can go into the committee meeting to be able to take EIC. Sorry for the clarification there.
Can we just take a 5-minute break?
Sure, we can take a 5-minute break.
Thanks.
Sorry, this is Reza. To be clear on the path forward, we're going to take 5, and then are we going to, go into the EIC committee meeting before lunch?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes now, come back. The board will be recessed. We'll go into the Enforcement Intervention Committee meeting after the 5-minute break. And then, as I understand, after that committee meeting, we will break for lunch or go to the ELC. Okay, so 5-minute break, EIC meeting, lunch break, and then the ELC, the Education and Licensing Committee meeting, will take place in the afternoon, and then the board itself will reconvene only for a brief closed session. The board does not have any further open session material for today. So maybe 12:30. Sorry? We'll be brief. I think the WebEx is going to be closed out since we are not going to be having any more discussion in open session. So the WebEx will be closed. The board will reconvene in person here after the closed session, strictly to adjourn. But otherwise, we're not going to be returning to any discussions in open session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And Mary Fagan, you should have a link to join us in closed session.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Woods. Woods is here. Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez here.
And Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen is here.
And David Lawler.
David Lawler is here.
Okay, quorum is established. We will now go into closed session.
Okay.
Can you hear me in there? Is Mike still there or did he leave?
Hey, Mark. This is Lori virtually. I can hear you. I don't have him up as participant.
Yeah, it looks like Mike left.
Yeah. And
Okay, yeah, they're trying to establish a quorum in there, and I think he closed the WebEx. I mean, he closed the stream.
Oh, okay.
So
Can they sign in virtually on a laptop from their location and come on camera? I
yes,
think that would
they're,
work just the same.
well, yes, Matt, Yvonne, and Marissa are still in there.
Awesome. We will wait for one of them to join the WebEx and use their laptop to.
Actually, Yvonne's signed on. Let me see. Matt's not signed on, and Marissa's not signed on.
I have Yvonne showing in attendees. I also have
Yes.
Jovita showing in attendees.
Oh, hold on. Let's see. You have Jovita in there?
Yeah, Jovita's
Hold
on via her
Oh,
phone.
there she is. I see her. I got her.
Yep.
Okay, there she goes. Okay. Jovita, are you there?
Yes, can you hear us now?
Yay, thank you.
We can hear you.
Okay. So at this point, we are going to, there's a quorum of us, of the board members here at HQ2, and we're going to adjourn at 4:37.
Sounds great. Thank you, Reza. Thank you guys for all you do.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening. Bye.
You too.